Hi, thanks for visiting Bible Mountain. This is the fourth lesson in a series of lessons in the book of Obadiah. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about the geographical context. In the first lesson, I talked about why Obadiah is in the Bible. Obadiah was originally written to pronounce judgment upon the Edomites because of how they treated the Israelites, and that's an example for you and I to learn from. In the second lesson, I talked about the biblical context. I showed where Obadiah fits in the Bible. In the third lesson, I talked about the historical context. I talked about where Obadiah fits on a timeline of world history. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about the geographical context. I'm going to show on a map where the events of Obadiah took place. This is a map of the world. On the left, we have North and South America. Off to the right, we have Asia and Australia. In the middle, we have Europe and Africa. The area where Europe, Asia, and Africa meet each other is what is known as the Middle East. This is a map of the Middle East. Right in the middle, we have the nation of Israel, Jordan, and Lebanon. That is where most of the events in the Bible took place. To the lower left, southwest of that, is the country of Egypt. Multiple events in the Bible took place in Egypt. Off to the right, we have Iraq and Iran. Multiple events in the Bible took place in that area. Across the top, we have Italy, Greece, and Turkey. Events in the New Testament took place up in that area. When we start reading the Bible, the first couple chapters we can't really place on a map. We can begin to place events on a map after the Great Flood, when Noah and his sons landed in the ark. The general consensus is Noah's ark probably landed somewhere in modern-day Turkey. After Noah and the ark, we read about the Tower of Babel. That probably took place in the Mesopotamian Valley, the valley that is formed by the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. That's an area known today as Iraq. After the Tower of Babel, we read about Abram. Abram was born in the lower end of the Mesopotamian Valley. God told Abram to move to a different land. So Abram and his family moved to Haran, and then later they moved to the Promised Land. At that time it was known as the land of Canaan. We call it the land of Israel. While in this land, God gave promises to Abram that he would have many descendants and that his descendant would be a blessing to the whole earth. Abram was also told his descendants would inherit the land that he was in. Abram had a son named Isaac. Those promises were passed on to Isaac. And then Isaac had two sons, Jacob and Esau. The promises that had been given to Abram and then Isaac were passed on to Jacob. Esau did not receive those promises. Therefore, Jacob stayed in the land where Abram and Isaac had lived, whereas Esau moved southeast into an area known today as the country of Jordan. Near the end of Jacob's life, he and his descendants moved to Egypt because of a famine, and they were there for several hundred years. During that time, the descendants of Jacob became the Israelites, and the descendants of Esau became the Edomites. While they lived in Egypt for several hundred years, the Israelites became slaves. Eventually Moses came and he led the Israelites out of slavery into the wilderness. He took them to Mount Sinai and gave them the Mosaic law, and then he led them to the Promised Land. Moses wanted to lead the Israelites through Edom, but Edom would not allow them to go through, so the Israelites had to go around Edom in order to get to the Promised Land. The Israelites lived in the Promised Land for several hundred years without a king. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. Eventually they received a king, and David became king. David established Jerusalem as his capital. During David's reign, he gained authority over the Edomites, and so the Edomites began serving the Israelites. When David died, his son Solomon became king. After Solomon died, the kingdom split into two. There was a northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom was called Israel. The southern kingdom was called Judah. The descendants of David and Solomon ruled over the southern kingdom called Judah. During those years, the Edomites gained their independence from Israel and did not serve the Israelites anymore. During those years, various countries came and attacked the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, and it was during those attacks that Edom stood back and did not help the Israelites, and in fact the Edomites helped to plunder the Israelites, and it was in response to that that the book of Obadiah was written. So that is the geographical context. Let me review why Obadiah is in the Bible and why you and I should study it. And we find this in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11. Now these things happened to them as an example, and they were written for our instruction, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. That verse was written in general about the entire Old Testament, but Obadiah is part of the Old Testament, and so it applies to the book of Obadiah. What we read about in Obadiah is an example for us to learn from, and it was written for our instruction. And so just like we should read the entire Bible, we should read and study the book of Obadiah so we know what happened to the Edomites, what they did to bring about their destruction and punishment, and what we need to do to make sure we don't do the same mistake that Edom made. Thanks again for visiting Bible Mountain. If you have already joined my email list, thank you, and please forward this to someone else who you believe would benefit from Bible Mountain. If you have not joined my email list yet, please do so now. My email list is free. In order to join, go to BibleMountain.com, click on email, and that will take you to a web page where you can sign up. Your email address will not be sold nor given away. Once again, thank you for visiting Bible Mountain.